All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our latest ALTA Insights webinar. I'm Jeremy Yohe, ALTA's Vice President of Communications, and today we've got a great presentation lined up to provide some strategies to help you develop a cybersecurity risk management plan. Title and settlement companies report that volume of cyber attacks have either increased or remained the same when compared to 2020. And because of this, you and your staff need the skills and tools to respond to an ever-changing cyber landscape. So thank you for taking a little time today to help you develop your plan. Before starting, I need to touch on a few housekeeping items. Today's webinar is being recorded. You'll get an email with a link to the recording tomorrow, and you can always access all of the webinar recordings at alta.org/webinars. And you can also right now download a PDF of the presentation from the handout section in the GoToWebinar window. And you can also get a copy of ALTA's Cybersecurity Incident Response Plan template, which the speakers will touch on during the webinar. If at any time you have a question, submit them through the questions box. We'll hold some time for Q&A at the end. I do need to thank F&F Family of Companies for sponsoring today's webinar. And before introducing today's speakers, here's a short message from Fidelity.
F&F is a great place for agents.
We'd like you to join the largest network of agents.
We love our F&F agents.
Thanks for being a loyal agent.
We love our partnership with you.
F&F is your agency partner in growing your business market share.
The F&F agents love working with the Michigan F&F agency team.
We'd like to thank you for being an agent of Fidelity Family of Companies. We really appreciate the relationship.
You'll love working with us.
F&F is dependable.
We look forward to the opportunity to work with you.
Lean on F&F.
Lean on F&F.
Lean on F&F.
Lean on F&F today.
You'll love working with us.
Thank you for your support of F&F.
Thank you so much for being a partner with us at F&F.
God bless you, and make today a Fidelity Day.
I'm here to tell you F&F is for you.
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 All right. Well, thank you, F&F, and thank you, Linda. Joining us today, we have Linda Grohovic. Linda is Senior Vice President and Director of Education and Marketing for the F&F Family of Companies. And Linda, I'll turn it over to you to introduce the two speakers today. So thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, Jeremy, and thank you to ALTA for another great ALTA webinar offering. So today we're going to talk about risk management, and F&F proudly has put together two of our solution partners here today from Complex and from Closing Lock. So we have Andy White. Andy is co-founder and CEO of Closing Lock. Prior to Closing Lock, Andy worked as a computer engineer for various companies, ranging from an early stage startup that raised over 100 million to the globally recognized tech giant Samsung. He has published papers in international scientific journals, has been awarded 7 patents in the computer hardware and software industries, and is an inventor on 5 other patent applications. Andy holds a BS, an MS, and a PhD in computer and electrical engineering from Auburn University. So obviously, Andy is a smarty pants. Brian Friedman comes from the long background in cybersecurity, serving as a federal technical principal for HPE, leading East Coast Channel engineering for, you're going to have to tell me what the name is, Brian. Is it Silence?
Silence, like.
Silence.
Yep.
And now running the sales engineering for Complex. When not working, Brian enjoyed spending time with his wife and son, along with being an avid motorcycle mechanic. So we have two very technologically savvy people for you here today. Now, the reason why we call this risk management is because what we're going to be talking about today is more than just what goes under the word cyber. I think we're actually using that word cyber or cybersecurity in a manner that we only think it means phishing attempts or maybe ransomware, but risk management is a lot more than just cybersecurity. We look at, and a lot of different areas of risk management. It could also entail supply chain breaches, cloud storage safety, ransomware, event chains, data vulnerabilities, whether it's data in motion or data at rest, monetary vulnerabilities, whether it be mortgage payoff scams or any sort of way that the criminal actor can access funds that are not theirs. Also, non-human elements of risk management versus the human elements. Now, these areas of risk have been growing. Yes, we know the lingo, but our guests today and our presenters will give you some of the statistics that warrant that it is still not going away. We have not really been able to attack everything at the same time. It's almost like a whack-a-mole game at the carnival. We get a handle on one thing and two other things pop up. And we hear a lot of the things in the field that people are doing, but maybe not doing enough of, or that they're familiar with doing things and they're talking the talk, but they're not walking the walk. Also, when we talk about risk management, we're talking about a written plan, written policies and procedures that you can share with your leadership, with your employees, or with third-party vendors. Because if you don't have a written plan, what happens is when you truly need this plan or some breach occurs, there's no place to go to really look at the steps that you're supposed to take. Because I don't know about you all, but when I'm in a high stress situation, I kind of forget 5 of the 10 steps that I'm supposed to do versus being very clear-minded. So let's talk the talk as well as walk to walk today, right? So with that, I'm going to hand it over to our experts, Andy White and Brian Friedman.
Thanks so much, Linda. We appreciate everybody taking the time with us today. And it's always embarrassing hearing somebody read out your biography, especially if you're like me and you don't take yourself that seriously. So thanks for that wonderful introduction. Like Linda said, we're going to be talking about risk management. The goal is that not only do you walk away with some things you can do from your company's perspective, but also some tangible takeaways that you can use in your personal life as well, because we're going to be focusing a little bit on the cybersecurity aspect of risk management, but we will touch on some of those other topics that Linda mentioned. But a lot of these things apply personally as well. So not only keeping your companies protected, keeping yourselves protected. So
I think the other part here we want to focus on too is, we're going to talk about things you guys can do today, leverage what you've already invested in, and really be able to leave this meeting with tactical and actionable items you guys can implement. Also, too, when you're presenting next to Andy with a bio like that, it's intimidating sometimes, but it's a bio that would make even my mother proud. So,
Brian, I have no doubt you will hold your own today. So I'm looking forward to the conversation with you. We do have slides. We've made a lot of slides. Brian and Linda and I got together. We put together a lot of material, some from Closing Lock, some from Complex, some from Fidelity. We took it all, we combined it all together. So we probably have more slides than we have time to talk about. But the goal was, let's get as much material as we can on the slides, and then we'll go through the slides in a conversational manner, and we'll probably skip a lot of them, but at least you'll still have that resource after the conversation here available for you. One of the things we always like to start with when we talk about cybersecurity, risk management, et cetera, this is a book on Amazon. So it's the law of manifestation here, the law of attraction. If you just manifest out into the world that you want to win the lottery, then this book will teach you how to actually win the lottery through that manifestation. You can see it's got 850 ratings on Amazon. It's super popular there. You go read the reviews. It's pretty funny. People say, hey, I wanted to manifest winning the lottery, and so I bought this book, and then I did. So you can take that same approach to risk management and cybersecurity if you want to. That's the silver bullet solution when it comes to risk management. It's just one thing. You buy this book, and then you manifest it out there that you aren't going to have any problems, and you're done. Myself, I'm a little more practical. I don't think that's probably the best approach. So if you're not looking for that silver bullet solution and instead you want to kind of get some tangible things you can start practicing today, then let's stick around for the rest of the presentation here. From an outline perspective, we'll just run through some quick stats. We don't want to bore you with stats, but it is important to kind of know what's going on and see the trends in the industry and cybersecurity more generally speaking. We'll talk about some tangible risk mitigation things that we can all be doing both professionally and personally. And then I want to highlight on some ALTA resources. So Brian and I went through the ALTA resources, found a lot of good stuff. In fact, we've even served on some of the working group committees that have put together some of these resources for you. So it's important that you know where those things are so you can be implementing them in your day-to-day business life here. Brian, you want to kick us off on the first couple of stat slides as we go through here?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we all can agree cybersecurity is a problem. I mean, that's why you're attending webinars like this to kind of learn more about this. But I want to be able to highlight a couple key points as we walk through, one, the breadth of the problem, but also two, what's happening to people big and small out there. You look at some of these attacks here that are getting big. They are targeting large-scale organizations. They're also targeting small organizations. It's not just about disrupting services or taking things offline in a hacktivist approach, but it's also about how can I make money doing this too. And attackers are taking a large net and is looking for anyone who falls into it. Andy, if you can pop to the next slide really quick. And we can see how this is, being very profitable for hackers across the board. When you look at some of these names here on the bottom, you see some big hitters. You see Twitter, you see Garmin, you see Carnival Cruise Lines, Marriott, all organizations with multi-million-dollar security budgets, and they're still falling to cyber attacks across the board into the amount of 10.5 trillion by 2025. The thing I like to also point out to organizations too is there's a lot of basic steps that really kind of fall into both myself and Andy's area of expertise around risk and identity, protecting yourself and your organizations. A lot of these cyber attacks are focused on reaching the identity component, gaining access to credentials or passwords, and then be able to use those identities or use those passwords to then commit wire fraud, commit escalation into sensitive data, hold ransom anything else you might own or from a data perspective, from clients to money to financial information, et cetera. But that's equating down to around 8.5 trillion by 2025 as well. So you can see the scope and why identity alone is a massive focus for attackers, because to be honest, as much as we work our jobs to make money, attackers are working in their job of attacking organizations to also make money as well.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And to Brian's point there about compromising accounts, email account compromise, business email compromise, stealing identities so that they can then perform these BEC scams. You guys all know this already. You see it in the industry all the time. Email losses account for the vast majority of wire fraud in the industry or any other kind of financial losses in the title industry. And to Brian's point earlier, it's not just big organizations like he was talking about. There's a whole list of giant organizations with big security budgets there that still get hit, but small, medium-sized businesses get hit as well. You can actually see the stats there. $2 million is the average cost of a cyber attack on a small, medium-sized business. So it's important we take this stuff seriously. And like we said, we'll try and come up with some tangible things we can talk about that will help you guys protect yourselves. Like I mentioned a minute ago, email, #1 problem for all of these scams. Typically, all malware just about is delivered through email, all business email compromise, email account compromise, all of those losses are a result of using email. And it's not that email is wrong, it's great as a communication tool. The problem is when you start trusting that the other person who sent you that email is who they are pretending to be, that's when things get pretty tricky there. And so we're going to talk today about some options for either locking down and securing your email or maybe avoiding using email altogether for certain types of communications. And I won't spend hardly any time on this, but you guys already know why you're the center of the universe when it comes to real estate targets for particularly wire fraud or any type of other fraud and title companies deal with on a daily basis. 350+ million was reported loss to the FBI last year. Between them and ALTA, the actual estimate is that maybe only 15% of losses actually get reported. So that number could easily be in the billions of dollars lost. The reason being, title and escrow companies, as you know, sit at the center of the universe for real estate transactions. They have communications with every party on the transaction. They're the ones responsible for the money coming into the escrow account and responsible for the money going out. So it makes you guys the perfect target for these fraudsters out there to try and get large sums of money from you.
And one other point, Andy, I want to make on that last slide too. When you look at kind of this graphic, you can see all the various parties that are involved. And this is also what attackers are doing today, and not just trying to attack organizations directly and ransom company one. They're also going after what we're calling second and third party breaches as well, meaning I'm going to ransom the primary organization that I attack, but then that organization holds data for company A, B, C, D, or individual A, B, C, D beyond that. And they're going to ransom those organizations or those individuals as well. And so instead of just getting one ransom from one company, I can now get 250, 500 ransoms. And so attackers are looking to grow their ROI as well. And that's also why title and escrow and really people involved in financial or real estate transactions are such a juicy target for attackers, because direct access to money or also directing people who have money or are spending money and have vested interest in getting that money back.
Yep. And to Brian's point, you see it all the time. Realtors' email accounts get hacked, and then the hackers, fraudsters sit there and watch all the transactions that you guys are taking care of and see who the buyers are, who the sellers are that are interacting with those realtors. And then they insert themselves either pretending to be the realtor, pretending to be the title company, et cetera, on the transaction. So let's talk about some tangible risk mitigation. This is a long list, so I don't expect you to read through all of this while we're on the call today, but we did want to put it in there. This comes directly from one of Fidelity's presentations that they put together. It's a great list of things to do. I love the title of this slide because it's very apropos. Don't be the slowest kid when the bear comes to camp, right? It doesn't necessarily mean you need to be the fastest runner in the world in order to avoid the bear there. You just don't want to be the slowest one. And so what we're going to do today is talk about several of these items that I have underlined here that we can take active steps today, both personally and professionally, to protect ourselves from these underlined items. That doesn't mean the underlined ones are more important than the other ones on the list. It just means we don't have time to cover 14 bullet points here on what you need to be doing on a daily basis. So we're going to try and hammer home several of these and make sure everybody knows what they are and how to adjust for them. One of the other analogies that I always use, Brian and I were talking about this recently. He's an adjunct professor. I served a year at Auburn as a professor there as well. And the thing I used to tell students on the first day of class was, you don't necessarily have to make an A on every assignment to get an A in the class. You just need to be scoring better than everybody around you. And that somewhat applies to cybersecurity. It's both ways. Brian will talk in a minute about how it's important to be perfect when it comes to cybersecurity as well. But you do want to make sure you're not the easiest target for hackers out there. Hackers are typically lazy people as well. They like to go after the easiest path to money. And so making sure you're not the easiest target in the scenario is important.
I think that one thing I will point out too, if you look at this list and as you kind of spend some time reading it, a lot of these items here don't require money to actually start doing these items. You're going to leverage your existing tools and enable the features that are already on them. Having a firewall either on the device level, or maybe you might have one, in your office, for example, turning this on, enabling those rules, disabling certain ports that you might not need. Very easy to do. Updating your software is a configuration item in all mobile devices, on all laptops. You can set it to be automatic updates, which include security updates from the device level. We were going to talk about a couple different ways for password managers and reusing passwords. Get off sticky notes. Get off using, writing things down. There's great ways to generate complex and lengthy passwords, but also a great way to manage it too, so you're not burdened by the human element of remembering all those passwords that you might have created over time.
Yep, that's exactly right. That's great. So let's start talking about some of those individual things that we had highlighted there that we can start doing today. Like I said, both personally and professionally. Don't think these only apply to businesses. A lot of companies, big corporate entities, typically will provide a corporate VPN for you to connect to protect your connection. So it's important when you're on any type of shared Wi-Fi, public Wi-Fi, anything that's not protected from a, say, corporate security perspective, that you lock down that connection, because fraudsters can intercept communications that go through public Wi-Fi. So if you go to Starbucks and connect to their Wi-Fi, anybody else on that network, if any of their computers are infected, fraudsters can then listen into your traffic that's going through that connection. Same thing when you visit a hotel, an airport, etc. And so using these wireless free options that exist out there, it's important to protect that connection. If your company does not provide a corporate VPN, which a lot of smaller businesses do not, then you need to have some other options available. There are some third-party vendors out there. I've listed a couple. I'm not necessarily endorsing Private Tunnel or NordVPN. I have used both of those personally, but it is good to find either a VPN or know how to tether through your phone. If you connect through your mobile phone, that traffic over that data connection is actually encrypted, so you don't need a separate VPN from that perspective. But doing one of those two things, so either avoid the public Wi-Fi and go with tethering, which a lot of times that can be free, but it can run up data usage charges, so you want to be paying attention to that with your carrier, or connect through a VPN if you are connecting through a public connection. They're pretty cheap. To Brian's point earlier, a lot of times they're free. The reason I have the American flag posted on there is that we want to make sure that you use a VPN that's hosted in the US. There are some other countries that host VPNs that monitor all of your traffic that's also going through. So it's basically essentially being on a public Wi-Fi at that point. So you want to make sure to probably buy a VPN that's domestic if you do choose to go that route.
One good rule of thumb, that if you're generally not paying for something, you are the product. So if you're not paying for it, your data is probably being sold or observed in some way to market to you or sell to somebody else so they can market to you.
Yeah, exactly right. But these things are typically pretty affordable. So if you're not going to do the tethering, you know, shell out a few bucks a month, get a VPN. If you own the business, get a VPN for all of your employees there. I do that here at Closing Lock. Everybody has VPN access. So if they're ever remote, they don't have to worry about their connection being protected. If you follow Rick Diamond from Fidelity on LinkedIn, you will see he is a big proponent of keeping your software updated, as am I. Every time I see one of his LinkedIn posts there, I try to click like on it so it reaches more people. It is very important to update things regularly. You're probably, you know, if you're using Google Chrome, you've seen up there before the little update button in the top, and it goes from green to yellow to red as it's waiting for you to finally update that. It's very important to actually click that. Software companies, software is developed by people. Everyone always says in risk management and cybersecurity, people are the weakest link. And while that's true, that also applies to the people that are providing cybersecurity solutions. So the people that are writing the software, they're the weakest link too. They accidentally put bugs or backdoors in there, etc. Hackers use those to get into different systems. And so these software companies, they're posting updates for us. Most of the time you can set these to automatically perform these updates, but you want to make sure you're keeping all of your systems updated, phones, browsers, OSs, etc. there. Those are also all free, so there's really no excuse to not keep your systems updated. Password managers, I love password managers. I've got a couple of examples listed here, LastPass and 1Password. I use LastPass both personally and professionally. We use it at work. Every Closing Lock employee has a LastPass account. They keep their passwords in there. We'll talk later about how to actually lock down your password manager. But if you don't know what this is, a password manager is an application that stores all of your passwords. So basically it is the keys to the kingdom or keys to the castle there. All of your passwords get stored locally inside of this password manager app. And then you pull those out every time you want to log into a different system. So when I'm logging into my account, or I'm logging into my email account, or logging in wherever, I go get that password out of my password manager. The advantage is it creates a unique and complex password for you, the manager app does, for every single one of your sites. So you don't have to then physically try to remember all of your complex passwords for all the different sites that you're signing up with. So you can sign up with every site you want. You'll have a different password on each of them. And we'll talk in a minute about how to lock down those password managers as well.
The one thing I will say around password managers is that they've really done an excellent job at making it very, very seamless to use both on mobile and also on your laptop desktops, including sharing passwords with other people, though there are some cases you might need to do that, but we also are going to encourage you not to do that. But from having a mobile device and logging into your LastPass account, it automatically senses forms when you want a password and can suggest the password very, very, very easily. So I don't want anyone to leave this conference or webinar really with the sense that if I have to implement this thing, it's introducing a whole series of complications and friction to your daily workflows, especially for those of you who are on the road meeting clients at sites where you're kind of, you really are never really at a desk or really have the benefit of having a full service desktop experience when you're trying to work.
Yeah, that's a great point. The ease of use is through the roof for these things. So there's no good reason to not use it. And to Brian's point about sharing passwords, that's exactly right. We don't typically want to do that, but we're practical people. There are scenarios in risk management. There's a lot of conversations around the bus factor, right? Like what happens if Andy goes out and gets hit by a bus? Is there a backup for that system now that Andy's been run over by the bus and he can't log into our sensitive systems anymore? Is there somebody else that can do that? So one way to increase your bus factor is to share passwords, and that practically does happen. Like Brian said, we would not encourage that. We don't want you to share passwords, but these apps do allow you to control that password sharing. So if you log into LastPass, and I've got some great examples here at Closing Lock where we have systems where you're only allowed to have one user account for that system. If we make that system accessible only by Andy here, then we've got a pretty big problem with a bus factor of only one person in that situation. And so I do use LastPass to share those passwords when needed with other employees of the company so that they can log into those systems as needed. Again, I don't recommend doing that, but there are cases where that's required, and password managers provide a secure and easy way to do that. Multi-factor authentication, most people know what that means. It is a fancy term here, but it actually just means combining two of the following, either knowledge, possession, or inherence. Knowledge being something you know, like a password is typically considered the knowledge factor of authentication. Possession, something you own, like a hardware token or a mobile phone where you get a text message sent to you, that qualifies as possession. And then inherence, something that you are. So maybe some biometrics, an eye scan or a fingerprint scan or something like that. Combining these things, it's what creates multi-factor authentication. Most systems now allow some form of multi-factor authentication. The most common that you'll see, banks often do this, Closing Lock does this. When you log into your system, you put in your password and then you get a text message sent to you to type in your code. All of these things are free. All of these services, even Facebook and other social media companies will provide multi-factor authentication options where you link your phone as that second factor of authentication. So you're using a strong password that you've generated that's unique from your password manager there, and you're using multi-factor authentication with your cell phone or some hardware token, etc., to let you into the system.
There's also some good apps too. Sorry, really quick. There's also some good apps out there around. Actually, I think you're about to cover what I was about to say. Sorry. Didn't mean to jump ahead on you, Andy.
No, go for it. Yeah, go for it.
No, I was going to say there's a lot of great apps out there that allow you to do what Andy's demonstrating or really kind of showing you on this slide around two-factor authentication via software token. So Authify, he's showing here. Duo is another great one. Google Authenticator is free from Google and works with a lot of services, and it's very, very easy to use. There's just a rolling token, and when we say token, really it's just a 6-digit number that's unique to your device, to your situation, and to you that you can provide to say, I am me, right, along with my username and password. So it's a great way to level up the authentication of a user as part of this.
Yeah, and I've got make sure you have backup access there. And so one thing that a personal story I like to share, several years ago, I upgraded my iPhone, and I think I was using the Microsoft Authenticator at the time. What I didn't realize was your iPhone gets backed up to the cloud, so you migrate to a new iPhone, it restores itself from the cloud, but the software tokens in that particular app, Microsoft Authenticator, are all unique and new and assigned to that particular device. So when I changed iPhones, I lost access to my software tokens. I spent over a week on the phone with Microsoft trying to get access back into my email account because I did have it locked down with two-factor authentication. So the important thing to say here is make sure that the software tokens, if you are using these software tokens, to save some type of backup. And I'll give a tangible way that I typically do this. Whenever you set up a software token for a new service, they'll give you recovery codes or backup codes. Now, most of us, myself included until a couple of years ago when I had this issue, just click, okay, continue, whatever, I don't care. Yes, I've written down these codes. Yes, I've saved this QR code, whatever. And then you just move on with your life and you never think about it. But when you do actually need those recovery codes, that becomes a big problem. And so what I do now is a lot of times is I'll print out a physical document with those backup codes, put it in my fireproof safe I have at home. That's physically protected. Obviously, the odds of somebody logging in and getting that system or getting that paper out of my safe and then actually logging in. But I have a backup record of those codes. So if I do upgrade my phone in the future and lose access, or if I lose my phone, etc., I can still get into those systems. And then lastly, we talked about silver bullet solution earlier. We can just manifest away our risk management problems. There is no one size fits all. If there was one easy thing to do, we wouldn't need a webinar, or the webinar would have been 5 minutes long, and Brian and I would have said, great, just do this one thing. Thank you all for your time. We'll go have lunch and everybody have a great day. Unfortunately, that doesn't exist. You have to layer these things together. Just doing a password manager is not sufficient. Just doing multi-factor authentication is not sufficient. Do all of these things together. The thing I love really combining is password manager and multi-factor authentication. And this is a screenshot from my actual phone here. So this is my personal LastPass account there. And this is the token that gets generated. So I have a LastPass password manager, and then I have a two-factor authentication code to access my password manager. And so you're able to kind of doubly lock that down. In order for somebody to get into my password manager, they need to know my password to access it, and they need access to my device to access it. And so anytime you can combine these things together, you get much stronger layer of protection there.
And so Andy's saying layer in here too, but a very common industry term you might hear is defense in depth. It's also the phrase people will reference the same exact concept around of having multiple layers of security to help protect your organization. Think about it in terms of a castle, where you have a drawbridge, you have a moat, you're going to fill it with tons of alligators, lots of fire. You need to have archers to guard the walls. All those items, very Game of Thrones style, but those are all legitimate points around security organization, from doing constant updating to having good patch management policy to having multi-factor or monitoring solutions in place. All those will go to contributing to having an overall good security posture.
Absolutely. If you get some of those dragons too from Game of Thrones in there, that helps as well.
Dragons can be expensive sometimes, though.
That's true.
Well, I actually, I like that you brought up the dragon analogy, because it actually fits really well into what we call Q-scanner on the complex side. So certainly protecting the ground is important, but we also need to protect the air, right? And so being able to assess and understand what your castle looks like and the threat vectors that exist or where you might be weak is an important part of this. So what Complex does, or is delivered really to organizations to kind of help out and solve that problem in easy ways, to figure out, what does my public attack surface, what part of my castle is exposed, and that can be easily exploitable? Is the drawbridge always down? Do I not have really good nets to protect against dragons? Did I build my castle out of wood? So dragon attacks are really particularly bad. But Complex wants to be able to help people and organizations really with those initial things of, what do I look like on the outside? How juicy of a target I am to attackers? And what can I do to kind of limit my exposure around there, particularly when you think about some of the things that Andy's going to speak about in a little bit, from ransomware, from phishing style attacks, of having my domains or my emails impersonated. I think I'm able to send an email or forge emails for, Brian at Acme Corp or Brian at Acme Inc., and getting people or employees in your organization to click that, allow me to have access inside your organization. Again, a lot of the same talking points Andy has been making throughout this whole presentation, but Complex wants to be able to deliver something to be able to help organizations identify those risks, but then also providing steps that they can take to fix it. And often a lot of the solutions that are part of this output are really configuration items in the existing products you have today. Really don't think there's additional investments you generally have to make on top of this too. So we want to keep this very, very cost effective for these small offices, smaller teams, to be able to have good security as well, especially when you think about the dollar value of transactions totally and individually you guys deal with.
And risk management, cybersecurity, it's a complex issue, right? It's not like like we said, there's no silver bullet solution to this. And often it's important to leverage expertise from others. And so there are virtual or fractional services out there that you can outsource some of this work. So if your eyes are glazing over as we're talking through this stuff and you're saying, hey, I don't either understand it or I have no interest in it, you really need to be thinking about, hey, are there other people that I can leverage to help us fill in these gaps? And Complex provides some pretty cool stuff around virtual CISOs. So security officers that can come in and help you either build out the program or implement it, et cetera. Brian, I'll let you talk more to this, but I do think it's important that people know that there are kind of virtual or fractional options out there available.
Yeah, and it's exactly kind of what this slide is titled, Phone a Security Friend. finding someone who you can lean on as a trusted advisor, someone who feels like you can give you good advice around of what should I be doing here? I have a particular concern I have. How can I mitigate that concern? What should I be developing or working towards? Not necessarily that you might need someone to come in and do all the work, but really, how do I get pointed in the right direction? What should I be focusing on, and what goals and metrics should I be hitting along that journey? And then revisit that continuously. This is the same type of concept if you're doing goal setting in a sports scenario, right? Setting reasonable goals, benchmarking your progress, and then reviewing those results to see, have I made the correct progress from there? And then what should I be doing next to continuously improve my performance? But in this case, your performance is your cybersecurity posture, and really preventing risk or preventing business email compromise, preventing these types of items is always the goal. We also have the ability to kind of combine these two things together. So public attack surface, or what does my castle look like to an attacker, along with the advisement of what we can give you. Say we recommend these types of items as part of your organization to either improve this, implement that, develop those work plans so you guys can really know what you need to be working towards as part of that. So we really want to be helpful to these offices and these teams here as part of the FNF family to have good security posture and really protect your investment in the company, but also the investments that your customers have made with you in doing business with you as well.
Absolutely, good point. Do you want to talk quickly about the MDR capabilities here?
Yeah, so this is a next level up. So what this capability is being able to look at everything you've bought, everything you've procured over time. So firewall, AV, EDR, your window event logs. So really kind of the core application logs of the servers that might be running in your offices, and being able to monitor those for attacks and have that cybersecurity expertise to monitor those for attacks 24/7, be able to report it to you, report it to your IT guys, but then also to be able to investigate it and respond to it appropriately. So give you the guidance or recommendation, or take action on your security tools. So whether that might be, say we saw a piece of malware come into your environment, we identified it, we evaluate it, determined it was in fact malicious, we can then go ahead and look into your AV tool and then delete it off the network for you, all without you having to lift a finger. These are all capabilities that are part of the complex MDR or VSOC services, and it's all bundled up into one to make it very, very easy to offload a lot of that heavy lifting from 24/7 monitoring, looking at all your window event logs, managing response around security incidents, collaborating, investigating, and then actually remediating those items as part of it too. So Complex's MDR is also here to help us, another service offering. I'm always happy to have sidebar conversations, or if anyone's questions at the end of the seminar, we can always talk more about it then.
Great, thank you for that background. So some ALTA resources that we want to talk about. I do serve on some of the working groups. ALTA has put together some great resources for us in terms of risk management, and then also in terms of cybersecurity, wire fraud, et cetera there. One of the things I did want to make sure we talked about today was including the link, not only because I helped create some of this stuff and I want to get it out there, but it's super useful. I mean, people from all over the industry, CISOs at Fidelity and Stewart and all the other underwriters and big title companies get together on a regular cadence and put this material together to try and help people in the industry, maybe groups that don't have dedicated CISO resources, maybe they have fractional CISO resources, whatever that looks like. We wanted to put together some material to help you guys be prepared for any kind of incident that's going to come up. And so there is an incident response plan template that's posted there on the InfoSec page that's linked at the top. Of course, you'll have copies of these slides, so you don't have to write down this URL in order to access it. But we'll talk briefly about the incident response plan and briefly about employee training. And I do want to cover on wire fraud. We're going to talk about payoff fraud just very briefly at the end, because that is very topical in the industry right now. A lot of title companies are losing money because they're end up wiring money for a mortgage payoff to the wrong location there. So from the incident response plan template perspective, there is one that's already there. I didn't write down everything out of that incident response plan. It's several pages long. It's on ALTA's website. It's got a lot of great things that you can do. To Linda's point at the front end of the conversation, you want to be prepared. I was not a Boy Scout, but I know they always talk big about being prepared for the situation. We talked about don't be the slow kid in the camp when the bear shows up earlier. If you don't have a plan, if you're not prepared for it, when it does happen, it will be extremely scary and you will not have the best response to it. And so ALTA's compiled this list. incident response plan that really goes over some of the stuff Brian was talking about earlier, making sure you have a list of your assets, making sure you know who is in charge of what. You know, a common saying is if you don't know who's in charge, then nobody's in charge. That applies to risk management and cybersecurity as well. Who is in charge of your computer systems? Who is in charge of reporting if there is a breach or notifying the correct parties? Or if there's a wire fraud incident, who's responsible for calling the bank? Do you have somebody listed and written down that's doing that? And if that person's on vacation, we'll talk about the bus factor again, or if that person gets run over by a bus, what is the backup for those things? And so putting all this together, and I won't go through and talk about each of these things here, but you do need to have these things in place before they happen. Disaster recovery plan. What if the office loses power or there's a sewage leak and, you know, the whole office is flooded and all of a sudden nobody can get into work that day? What do you do when that happens? Or, you know, COVID-19 comes by and we all have to start working remotely all of a sudden. What do you do in those scenarios? And a lot of this is not necessarily do you need 1,000 pages of documentation of everything that could possibly go wrong. Just think through the common things that could affect your business in a negative way, business impact analysis. Sit down, spend 15 minutes brainstorming with your senior level colleagues and officials there of, hey, if something's going to go wrong, what is it going to be? And then how do we mitigate that from happening?
And these are all really kind of talking points around that your phone and security friend service with Complex can help you guys out. These are great resources to have, but if your eyes are just wide, you're not really sure how to even take the first step on this, this is really what that's geared towards to help you guys with those items.
Exactly. And it's amazing what you'll learn in just a 15-minute whiteboarding session with Brian and the experts at Complex, or even just your own internal staff, or if you want to talk to me about any of this, I'm happy to have those conversations as well. Just spending 15, 30 minutes just thinking about it, and all of a sudden you will uncover all of these different holes and gaps of things that you need to fill in, either from a cyber risk perspective, business continuity perspective, disaster perspective, whatever that looks like. Employee training. So Brian, you want to talk briefly about Complex there, and on the employee training, we've listed a couple of other vendors as well.
Yeah, so the employee training concept here really is focused on, if you think about kind of a lot of the threats, a lot of it's going to be the human aspect of things. People clicking emails, sending information out, you know, saving stuff in emails that should not be there, clicking those links to lead to downloads that you definitely don't want. Complex can help out in a lot of different ways, especially when it comes to things like breach simulation, or what do I do if this happens, or even simulating phishing campaigns where we'll craft, special emails for you guys, and we'll let you know the employees who have done a bad job as part of this. Phish Me and Know Before are also good organizations for security awareness training, which is great, especially when you think about kind of the people who are in the workforce today, around from digital natives, and then people who started their careers professionally in non-digital world, but then have since transitioned to a digital world that we are in today, where that innate understanding of risk or clicking on links and things like that are just not fully integrated as you would with the younger generation. So we want to be able to help orgs with a variety of user expertise, backgrounds, and technical expertise to be able to protect themselves regardless of where they came from or what their experience has been with technology. And then of course things like webinars. Being at a session like this, excellent first step or second or third step, but being aware, educating yourself, and then knowing what you need to do, or starting to take or think about the next steps I want to take for your organization. Excellent things. And Andy, I know you have a couple educational items, so I'll let you hit this last one.
Yeah, so opportunities, there are a bunch of them out there. ALTA is always offering. There are a lot of continued education processes and things at different conferences that you can attend. So make sure you're taking advantage of these resources. This webinar itself is being recorded, and Jeremy will make sure it gets uploaded to ALTA in the InfoSec section there under webinars. And so ALTA has prepared some of these things for us already. We just got to make sure we're taking advantage of them, making sure employees are trained and aware of these problems going on. And of course, obviously, wire fraud, that's what Closing Lock prevents. So I'm big and partial to the wire fraud section on the InfoSec page that Jeremy has there on the ALTA website that we've been talking about. So they've got a lot of different things that you can do there, talking about outgoing wire preparation. What do you do when there is an actual wire fraud loss? How do you respond to that? They've got a whole worksheet that you can work through. I have served on the working group committees that come up with these things, so I really try to push these over any alternatives out there, because these have been created by a lot of experts in this industry that have seen these issues happen time and time again. There are videos that ALTA has put together, infographics. The silver bullet that I always say here, which is kind of a theme of our conversation, is stop emailing and texting wiring instructions, because 95+% of that $350 million that was reported lost last year to real estate wire fraud was because of an email or a text message. And so if you can not rely on email and texting for sharing wiring instructions, which, shameless plug for Closing Lock, which is exactly what we provide, then I highly suggest going after something other than just emailing, texting wiring instructions. As soon as you put it in an email, a fraudster does the exact same thing, and then all of a sudden people are losing money at that point. Payoff fraud, we do want to talk about that. It's very topical. I'm going to show a quick illustration of that along with several solutions for avoiding payoff fraud in the future. You guys have seen the wire fraud stats. I'm not going to spend much time on that. What is interesting, if you take that $350 million and assume that only that's 15% of the reported losses to the FBI there, you divide that by the number of real estate transactions, you end up somewhere around $250 being the average amount that's lost just to wire fraud for real estate transactions. Now, most transactions do not have fraud, but the ones that do obviously lose a whole lot of money from it. And so when you peanut butter spread that total amount over the real estate transactions, it's pretty jaw-dropping about how much money we're sending overseas, basically, to finance terrorism, finance drug trade, et cetera. All sorts of bad things happen when these wire fraud attempts occur and are successful. Payoff fraud, I do want to talk about that quickly. I've got a screenshot here on the right-hand side. This is from one of our existing customers several years ago when payoff fraud was first kind of discovered. It's weird that fraud is discovered just like any other kind of technological advancement, but as you all know, wire fraud in the title industry, that wasn't even really a topic 6 years ago. 5 years ago, it started coming up. 4 years ago, the world was on fire, and then now we're here present where the world's still on fire when it comes to wire fraud. And so payoff fraud is a new vector of attack that fraudsters have figured out. It's not that new. Like I said, this one's actually dated from June 2019, but this was a fax that one of our customers received that looked exactly the same as the actual fax from Wells Fargo. The only difference is the account number was different. So all the other information, including the actual payoff quote, was the exact same as what the legitimate one was. And even coming from the fax number there, all that matched up identically, except the account number was different. That's how payoff fraud works. It either comes through fax or email. In most scenarios, the fraudsters get the payoff quote. They know what it's supposed to look like. They make it look exactly the same as the original. They just insert their own account number in there. What's even interesting about this one is the ABA is the same. So the fraudsters that were sending this to our customer used an account that they had control of at Wells Fargo. So the ABA routing number was also Wells Fargo. So the routing number was the exact same as the legitimate payoff account routing number would be. The only difference there were those account numbers. So don't think, oh, just because it looks legit or just because it came through fax. I've heard that one quite a few times from prospective customers. Hey, we get everything via fax. We don't have to worry about it. Fraudsters know that. They send them via fax as well. Some solutions to this. One is ignore. Sorry, Brian, did you want to hop in real quick?
No, I was just going to comment, like e-fax service is a thing, and you can send 1 million faxes in a second with a computer. That is not hard to do, especially if I'm calling through emails looking for things like this to take advantage of scenarios and automating all this. And a fraudster would absolutely do something at that scale very, very easily.
Yeah, that's great. I appreciate that. Yeah, e-fax is scary. Like you said, I mean, all this can be digitized. We think, oh, it's a fax. Somebody's on the other end actually faxing this to it. That's not the way the world works anymore, right? It can all be electronic.
100%.
So ignore it. That I think a lot of people actually put their head in the sand when it comes to payoff fraud because they don't know what to actually do to prevent this from happening. One option is call the bank every single time. So you get a payoff quote from Wells Fargo, you call up Wells Fargo and ask to make sure that that's a legitimate account number. Now, you can imagine you call Wells Fargo and ask to verify an account number. It will take quite a bit of time, and that is not an easy thing to do. You also want to make sure you're using a verified phone number and probably not the one that showed up in the payoff quote itself, because fraudsters will put their own phone number in there and then they'll gladly verify the account number once you call them there. The most common thing that we have seen done is to maintain a list of valid payoff accounts. So you guys close a lot of transactions, you see a lot of real estate deals, you've got all the payoff account numbers that you've been wiring to for years now. Keep a list of all of those, keep them, cross-reference that list with your new data as it's coming in. Make sure that when you're sending out a payoff that you know it's to one of those account numbers that you've sent money to before. Now, obviously, you want to lock that down. If some fraudster got in and inserted their own account number into your payoff, in your list of valid payoffs, then you'll just be validating against the fraudster's account number there. So it is important to lock that down. It can be difficult to aggregate data from a lot of different sources like that. You'd want to make sure no employees had malicious access to it where they could log in and kind of change things in that list of valid payoffs. So that can be tricky to do in practice, and there are the dynamic account numbers as well, where the account number is maybe based on the loan number, or Mr. Cooper has dynamic account numbers for each payoff statement as well. So that can be cumbersome to do. There are payoff verification services out there. Closing Lock has offered one for many years. In fact, 2019, when our customer sent this exact problem to us, is when we started developing our original solution. And basically what we do is we take care of maintaining that list of valid payoffs for you, so you don't have to worry about it. You don't have to worry about who has access to it. You have a record of who's actually verified which payoffs in the system there. So there are some payoff verification services out there. If you're not using one, I would highly recommend it. Most companies think, oh, this won't happen to me, and then of course it does happen to them, and it can be quite a nightmare at that point. We've only got a handful of minutes, so I'm just going to go quickly through these last couple of things, because I do want to give an opportunity to Brian to talk about Complex for a second, and then Q&A. Wire Fraud Response Plan, ALTA has some great resources on this. Please go check it out. I've worked on the working groups to put this together. A lot of time and effort has gone into creating these things to help you guys not lose money from wire fraud. We don't have time to dive into all the details of what's in here, but please do go check those things out. Lastly, real quick, I've already given a couple of shameless plugs through the presentation here about Closing Lock. We are a wire fraud prevention or solution platform. We handle inbound, outbound payoff fraud. Thousands of title professionals use it. This number here, the 100 billion, that's way old. I think we're probably closer to 200 billion at this point. A lot of money gets moved through the data through our system in a secure way. We don't have any losses. So would love to talk to you guys about that if you're interested, but now I'll turn it over to Brian to talk about Complex real quick.
Thanks, Andy. So Complex is really going to be here to help you guys out across really kind of any of the attack vectors, from ransomware to malware to identity-related threats, also along with managing the basic core services. So this is also where the MDR service comes into a really good play. I always kind of recommend just have a conversation first and then see what are the various ways Complex can help you out. We see a lot of these use cases here that we kind of talk about things that could impact your organization. I'm sure you guys are well aware of what these things might be. And if you don't mind going to the next slide.
Of course.
I think the output here really though is let's get tactical about it. Let's get operational. Let's find out what the actions and steps we need to take and move out of theory into actually taking action against attackers, because attackers aren't going to stop. They aren't going to rest. They're going to be going after you 24/7. We need to have things in place to take care of and mitigate those items. So whether it's simple as what does my castle look like, to I want to be able to implement something around full monitoring. Complex is here to lend a hand. I think this is you, Andy, or yeah.
This was a client case study for Complex, but since neither of us know who's going to read it, we'll just skip over and pass it to Linda. Fidelity has some great resources too. Linda, you want to speak to those real quick?
Absolutely. Each of the areas you have already mentioned, including the mortgage payoff fraud, we have a lot of additional resources that are all public offerings. So even if you're not a customer of ours, we are very willing to share these resources with you. We have an entire dedicated tab to risk management. We break it down, mortgage payoff fraud, cybersecurity, data security, and a host of other resources, including the ones you've seen here today. So definitely take those opportunities and to download those and look out for additional educational opportunities as well.
Great. So I think that brings us to our question and answer time. Sorry, I think we probably went a little over what we were supposed to, but I wish we had hours to talk about this stuff because there's so much material we didn't have a chance to get to. But yeah, happy to turn it over to you, Jeremy or Linda.
Yeah, Andy, Brian, thank you. Great information. Hopefully the attendees can leave with 1 or 2 or 10 tips on how to get started. Linda, you and I can pitch some questions. One that just popped in from Cody, and it's about wire fraud. How would you suggest sending wire information?
Yeah, if that's for me, I would suggest you use Closing Lock to send it. I've got a very biased answer. There are other services out there. I'm not gonna, Certified is one of them. I'm sure you guys are familiar with them as well. So any way that's not through email, I always talk about email is the way everybody sends wiring instructions today, and that's the way fraudsters end up spoofing it. If you can send it through another secure manner, Closing Lock provides a portal. You share that, your client logs in, they do multi-factor authentication to log in. That way they're getting their wiring instructions from somewhere other than email, because as soon as you put it in an email, the fraudster does the same thing, and now you're hoping your buyer knows which email is legitimate or not. So I say try to send it any other way. There are other services. I won't pitch just Closing Lock, but there are other services out there for that. And then once you get the wiring instructions out of your email system, and you tell your employees we're not sending it via email, you tell all of your customers, you can put it in your email signature, we will never email you wiring instructions. If you get wiring instructions emailed to you, just assume they're fraudulent. We're never going to email you wiring instructions.
And you probably have to tell your customers 10 times that you're not going to email them.
That's correct.
Every step in the process too, because the closer you get to the closing, I guarantee you buyers and sellers or anybody that's getting money or receiving money only hear the first 3 words of what you're saying because they're so anxious to get to the closing. So say it from the beginning, like with a title company, make sure you're giving them information with regards to any type of fraud or any type of risk that you see in the front end when the order is literally just coming in. So then that way you can take it through the entire process. So by the time you get to the closing, they've probably heard it from you like at least 7 times.
Let me add one thing not to do real quick too, because one of our customers learned this the hard way. Very large title company in Michigan. They came to us, they had posted their wiring instructions on their website, and it was just public information. They weren't too concerned about that being out there in the public. And so they were telling their buyers, hey, just go to our website to get our wiring instructions. Unfortunately, what happened is the realtors and real estate agents downloaded those wiring instructions as well, trying to be helpful to the buyers. And they would then email the wiring instructions to all the buyers. And now you can imagine the amount of fraud that exists when the realtors are emailing wiring instructions. And the title company came to us and said, hey, we can't post it on our website because the realtors are just downloading it and sending it to the buyers in that case, and that's causing actually more fraud than we had before. So please don't post it to your website. It seems like a good idea, but in practice it ends badly.
Brian, a question for you, and this was a data breach that impacted the industry. I don't want to call it the company name specifically, but Robert asked, would your product, based on what you know of it, have been able to identify vulnerabilities exposed in the breach of this company that hosted title company data?
I actually don't know the detail of that particular breach you're talking about. So hard to say, right? And I mean, this is true. Every attack is different. The concept of what I was talking about for our product is around risk in your public attack surface exposure. So think about like this, we'll go back to kind of the castle analogy. We find moats are great. People should employ moats, but if your moat is only 1 inch deep, that's probably not exactly a very solid moat. So we want to recommend you employ a deeper moat. Identifying vulnerabilities, so risks would be things like CVEs or known things in particular software. So I know sandstone's probably a really bad stone to build castles out of because the first time it rains, the castle falls apart, right? That's a vulnerability to sandstone castles, right? So we want to employ that. So 2 different ways to kind of evaluate things, but our focus is on the risk component. So things that attackers are going to be looking for to actively exploit you. So without knowing more details of that particular breach, unfortunately, I'm able to give you kind of a deeper answer around that. But I hope that analogy makes things a little bit more clear.
Yeah, I mean, we don't know exactly how the breach occurred, so you wouldn't be able to give a specific answer.
Yeah, it was
at the top of the hour, if you don't mind, a couple more questions.
Cloud storage.
Go ahead, Linda.
Sorry, Jeremy. Just breach of cloud storage. A lot of companies utilize cloud storage vendors, or there's a cloud storage that is inside of their title and escrow systems. So the question was based on, what happens when there's a breach there? What are things that you could do? Also, I mean, what we typically advise in any sort of audit is always have more than one place that things are stored, but safely. Cloud storage and X offsite. always have at least two places to gather information. But Andy or Brian, talk just a quick minute on cloud storage. How do you keep the vulnerability and the risk down on cloud storage?
Yeah, so a lot of the same things that I'm sure Andy's going to go down this route in a second is configuration. We talk about this on the slide around don't be the slowest kid when the bear comes to campus. Configuring your cloud storage appropriately. Not everyone needs to be an admin. Managing passwords for individual repos on cloud storage. Depending on what cloud storage or how you're using cloud services in general, from Google to AWS to Dropbox/Box, and kind of the size of your organization and how are you using cloud. Many organizations use cloud, but a lot of organizations use cloud incorrectly. Complex can certainly help when it comes to assessing your cloud security posture. We have additional services we really haven't dove too deep into on this call. And I know Andy has products around password and managing those types of access for passwords into cloud as well, right? Andy, any comment there?
Yeah, I'll just add, vet your vendors, make sure you know what they're doing with your data, especially if you're storing your data in the cloud, make sure you know what's going on there. And then we talked about business continuity to the disaster recovery plans earlier. Spend some time thinking about those scenarios. What happens if my cloud vendor goes down? To Linda's point, do you have a backup somewhere else? And then what does that look like? And so once you realize kind of the holes or the gaps in your security posture, then it's a lot easier to start talking about the solutions for those.
I will also say one more item on that is it doesn't hurt to pay for services like that too, because then you get SLAs and also a suite of enterprise tools that are just simply not in free versions that are really going to help you out for managing a lot of these items.
Okay, all right. Great advice, Brian and Andy. Just as a reminder, if you missed parts of today's webinar or if you think others in your office would benefit from listening, recording of the presentation will be available at alta.org/webinars, and you'll also get a link tomorrow. You'll get an email tomorrow with a link to the recording. We do need to thank FNF once again for sponsoring today's webinar. Thank you, Linda, for coordinating and bringing Andy and Brian together, and both of you, thank you for taking some time today and sharing your expertise. One quick note, one attendee said, "Roll Tide, Andy," just so.
Great. Yeah,
right.
Thanks everybody for the time. It was great. It was wonderful. We appreciate it. Sorry we ran over.
Had a great time. Thank you guys for having me.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.